Good morning, everyone. We've got everyone on mute for now, just to minimize voice collision. But we've got Jared Hanley, Brant Brereton, and Tom Mallon on the phone from Perpetuate Capital. And so thank you guys for being here, and Chairs, thanks for being here as well. A little context behind Perpetuate is this was birthed a bit of a brainchild of these three, really, as Brant and Jared have been early adopters of the 310 Coalition, with Brant and Jared's work with investment banking and their work really focused around helping companies transition to an ESOP type organization. Tom Mallon, longtime C12 member, that transitioned his company to an ESOP, and they felt a real need in the market for a mechanism to help companies facilitate that, and thus the birthing of Perpetuate Capital. And so these guys are going to walk through a little bit about what Perpetuate is, who it's for, and how to engage with them. We'll have a time for Q&A at the end, but if you have questions along the way, you'll see a box. You should have that on your GoToMeeting screen. If you use the chat box to just type in a question, then those will be kind of queued up and either answered along the way if it's relevant in a timely way, or we'll tee them up toward the end and address them then. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Let me open us in prayer, and we'll get started. So Father God, thank you for this morning. God, a beautiful day here in San Antonio, and thank you for technology that can connect us, God, all over the country as we learn and share and engage in these creative opportunities to advance your kingdom in the marketplace and these companies that we get to serve. And so we're thankful we get to do this. We pray that everything we do and say would honor you on this webinar. So thank you for the opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen. So I'm going to hand the baton to Tom Mallon, and he'll take it from here.
Thanks, Troy. I appreciate your kind words and the opportunity to speak to the chairs on this call. I'm joined by my partners, Brant Brereton. Brant is a San Jose-based investment banker, and his partner, Jared Hanley from Bend, Oregon. These gentlemen have assisted clients through all forms of exits, with an emphasis on assisting ESOPs or employee stock ownership plans. This presentation is focused on the various financing options for your member companies. It's not an ESOP primer. We do have one of those that's available that we can send a link out to. We'll do that after this webinar. However, all of us believe that for the right situation, an ESOP or a management-led buyout is the best outcome for maintaining the culture, the ministry, and the C12 membership after a sales transaction. At the end of the presentation, I have 3 recommendations for you to keep in mind as you counsel your members that are thinking about an exit. I was the founder and CEO of Regent Surgical Health in 2001. 3 years ago, we went through a sales process. We had a consistently growing 16-year-old company that enjoyed consistent profitability. I was a C12 member for the last 6 years in Dave Lassine's group in Chicago. At Regent, we had 12 owners, all working in the business. I was the largest, but not the majority owner, and we had no outside capital and no debt at the time. About half of our owners were Christian and valued my commitment to the C12 organization. After we went through a process of assessing private equity and strategic options, we determined that the ESOP was the best financial alternative on an after-tax basis and the best option to continue our culture and ministry. The sale enabled me to hand off the CEO role to our president, Chris Bishop, who lives in Nashville, and he was willing to join Dewey Green's group there. He was committed to continuing the ministry initiatives that we had instituted. And after that process, I met with Mike Sharrow at the Starbucks in O'Hare Airport. During that meeting, I complained to him about C12's lack of resources to help companies in our situation. We discussed the need to organize an effort to qualify private equity firms, investment bankers, and other providers to assist the C12 members in capital events and to assemble educational resources necessary to facilitate successful exits. The 310 Coalition was born soon thereafter. We have organized and housed resources at trellis.net. We vetted providers, including 2 Christian private equity firms, Sovereign Capital and Trinrock Capital. We've organized educational materials for the C12 community, including a podcast by Grant, which we'll forward to you, which involves describing what an ESOP conversion looks like. However, in going through this, we found the same thing that's lacking today that was lacking and almost halted our Regent ESOP sale. We had the senior lender lined up, we had the seller financing lined up, but due to the liquidity needs of myself and my partners, we had 50% of the transaction not financed by the sellers. And we went to the market to look for structured equity and basically found 4 options that were all terrible. They basically wanted current interest payments in the 12 to 14% range, with 30% of the upside going to them in warrants, yielding the investors about a 30% IRR. This was untenable to the sellers and to the management. It was unaffordable for the company. So what we found were aligned capital investors in our doctor partners, and we were able to close the deal. As we look forward with C12 members, there is not a Christian-funded firm that yet exists in the structured equity space. And that's why we founded Perpetuate Capital. It's a fund that will be organized by and funded by C12 members and Christian family offices to invest in C12 companies. Our premise is threefold: that the capital providers have 100% faith-aligned alignment, and that they're outcome-oriented. We will not equity position that demands an exit. So we will be long-term oriented, 7 to 10 years, and the company can pay us back, and they maintain control of their company. But most importantly, we're going to track the ministry activities and the generous giving programs that the owners have instituted and want to continue. And we want to perpetuate that. That's the name of our fund. In addition to that, Perpetuate Capital will covenant to the binding Christian arbitration that the 310 Coalition is committed to. But the other option, which no other fund involved in this will do, is that we will, on exit, protect the investment and the company to make sure that the ministry impact continues going forward. And that is something that we can do as structured equity. We can give our investors a market return, an 8 to 12% return, and give the company control of its culture and its ownership going forward. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Jared.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So as mentioned, Brant and I have assisted closely held companies in a number of financing structures over the last 30 years, but our focus has really been on the middle market, which is to say that's firms that have reached the point of consistent profitability and are able to tap into the private capital markets. So often that means, north of $1 million in cash flow, or at least a pretty obvious path to get there. And that's, as you can see on this slide, stage 3 and 4. But when a company needs help beyond what their traditional kind of basic banking relationship will provide. And what we've seen over the last 30 years, pretty consistently, is the growth of the world of private equity, which serves this middle market. There's $6 trillion of assets under management now in private equity, and probably over 2,000 firms in the U.S. alone. I imagine all of your members get calls from these guys all the time. And these firms, these private equity firms, certainly have filled a much needed role, namely providing an exit alternative to the middle market. But these benefits are often at the expense of the culture and community in which many of these great companies were built. And that's, private equity groups, by their very structure, they're forced to drive big returns through aggressive cost cutting or quick kind of pump and dump holdings, meaning they just liquidate their investment as quickly as they can after a short period to provide liquidity to their investors. And this also means, of course, that they need a controlling position so they can exit that position when they want, both in terms of ownership of the company, and generally they'll take over the board as well. And unfortunately, that means the ministry stops. So that's not our favorite type of deal. And we felt there just has to be a better way to provide that service. And so that's the alternative that we came up with. We provide the same capital for growth or acquisitions or exits, but we don't require a change in the company's culture, a change in the management, or even a change in the governance. We'll leave the board intact. And this is especially true for companies that operate for a greater purpose, beyond profit. That's the need that was missing. So we created Perpetuate Capital, which can provide that same type of capital that most private equity groups do, but we don't seek control or change in operations. And we do this, as Tom mentioned, through a very flexible financing structure called structured equity. So the last thing I wanted to mention, as you kind of look to the right of this slide, you'll see in stage 5 is that all ownership positions eventually must transition. And while everyone knows you can sell out basically to a competitor or private equity group, many don't consider selling in using a really elegant tax advantage structure called an employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP. And we firmly believe that all of these alternatives need to be equally analyzed and considered before any owner can make an informed decision as to how to affect their ownership transition. So those were the big points I wanted to touch upon. I'll turn it over to Brant.
Thank you, Jared and Tom. Men, in every effective presentation, there's what's called a through line, or a theme that connects each slide. And we want you to hang up from this call knowing everything that you will ever hear on the subject of your members transacting relating to 3 vital criteria points. And they're on the left. It's the C12 alignment. It's taking a long view towards the company, and most importantly, perpetuating the ministry impact of the business and ongoing membership within C12. So this is a really good little table to provide an even tighter focus on how C12 alignment, long-term view on the business operations, and perpetuating ministry intersects with the market realities of those 3 columns to the right. The third-party stock ownership, which is private equity or venture capital. 1, 2, using existing bank capacity to affect a transaction, or 3, using custom structured equity, potentially with an ESOP, although you don't need to, with Perpetuate Fund for either growth capital or liquidity. And that liquidity is going to be the same amount of liquidity that they could receive if they sold out to a private equity group or a venture capital. So if you look at the first column, PE or VC, we look at a C12 company selling its stock ownership in whatever percentage to an outsider, PE or VC. We know intuitively that these new secular owners of the stock care only about profits, not about how many employees come to the Lord or how much ministry outside the company occurs because of the profits of the company. those outside investment funds only hold their portfolio companies for an average of 5 years, statistically, which means that the company is for sale again in year 4. And that sale is all about how much money it can be sold for, not who buys the company from them. Ministry culture and financial giving goes away, period. Even if a Christian PE firm buys the stock of a C12 company, they eventually have to sell their stock to be responsible to their investors. I've never met one of them that will covenant to only eventually sell that portfolio company to a Christian buyer, who in turn will covenant to perpetuate the ministry and C12 membership with the business. So all that's really happening there is that the inevitable gets kicked down the road. If you look at the second column, bank debt, the C12 company can accomplish his liquidity or his growth goals with commercial debt. It's just not a clear-cut winning option. When we think about continued C12 alignment, yes, because he's not selling any of his stock ownership, he's retaining the company's independence and the alignment. But the amount of cash that he can tap is limited to his new loan covenants, which are going to be conservative, understandably, based on the collateral that the bank has to extend the loan. So the cash for liquidity, coupled with the need to pay the bank that 5 years, it keeps the alignment and perpetuation, but it really doesn't move the needle very much in terms of the cash required or desired within the transaction itself. So it's not a perfect alternative. If you look at the third column, receiving a structured equity investment from fellow C12 members and Christian family offices, however, is an entirely different story, and that's really what Perpetuate Capital is, as Tom and Jared have said. Receiving this type of investment from Perpetuate Fund, either for liquidity, which is selling stock to the ESOP or maybe directly to the managers if they don't want to use the ESOP structure, or they're not seeking liquidity at all, they're just looking for growth capital. Either of those scenarios, the fund accommodates. It provides, but in the liquidity transaction, we're delivering, as I said, just as much cash at close as if they sold out to a private equity group. And the cash that they receive at close in a sale using the ESOP structure can be tax-free. So it can actually be better on an after-tax basis than selling out to a private equity group. One could literally sell 100% of their stock to the ESOP, still retain control over the company, its culture, and its ministry spending. It's a highly customizable, company-specific investment that needs to be paid back over 7 to 10 years, sometimes longer. And those paybacks and the interest payments, everything about the investment is very customized to the cash flow needs of the business, where that business is in its growth cycle. So the C12 company's independence is perpetuated forever. They get the same or better liquidity cash at close. They stay in C12 forever. And most importantly, the ministry impact that the company is making perpetuates forever. So they don't have to use the ESOP to do it, but once they understand, as they analyze, what would it look like to sell out to a private equity group versus selling to the ESOP, they invariably choose the ESOP. Go to the next slide, Jared. So this is another way of looking at kind of the previous slide that Jared hit. So when a company's not large enough to tap public markets, then we're looking at private sources of capital. And that's really, if you look at that arrow, that vertical arrow that goes down, that's showing the type of private capital based on the size of the business, and the size of the business increases as you go down. Follow that arrow. And so you'll sort of see that these transactions often correspond with large growth initiatives where nobody's selling any stock or ownership for liquidity. They just need to grow the business, or they want to do an acquisition. They need the capital to do it, or they want to recapitalize the business for succession planning and owner exits, which is quite common. And so you'll see in that little bracket over to the right that this is where Perpetuate Capital provides capital to C12 companies. Growth, this mezzanine financing, and leveraged buyout, kind of accomplishing those three objectives. With that, I think I'm going to turn it to you, Tom, right?
Yes. So our goal is to link Christian capital providers, primarily C12 members and Christian family offices, to C12 companies desiring to raise expansion capital or transition to the next generation of Christian managers and owners. This allows the company to continue growing, expanding its financial and ministry impact. In the case of Region Surgical Health, we have seen our profits double in the last 2.5 years. We've seen employee engagement increase exponentially. We've seen ministry not perpetuated, but expanded. We've had a chaplain serving our corporate office for 7 years, and this year the people in the office asked him if he would lead a Bible study, and through that Bible study, 7 of our 42 employees accepted Christ in the spring. Frankly, nothing can compare to that in the secular world. I'm still on the board, I'm still the chairman of the board, but nothing, the economic return is wonderful, but the eternal return is mind-boggling. There are 3 calls to action from this podcast that we'd like you to consider as you counsel your members. First is start well in advance of the deadline date for any sale or change of ownership. Tap people into the 310 resources as soon as 2 years ahead of time. There are psychological impacts when people are selling their companies that is hard to predict. There are legal issues that need to be tied down. There's audit and reviewed financials that need to be assembled. There's quality of earnings tests that need to be done. There are projections that need to be made, and there's just as importantly as all that, there are charity options that you can take a year to 2 years in advance of a sale that can allow our largest partner, Uncle Sam, to bear part of the charity giving, which is a wonderful thing as taxpayers. The second call to action is to really do a transaction analysis as soon as possible. So be closer, not 2 years out, but at least a year, 6 months to a year out. That transaction analysis, which Brant and Jared do for a very reasonable price, basically compares a PE sale with a strategic sale and an ESOP sale and puts them all on an after-tax, apples-to-apples basis. And quite often when people see this, the ESOP frankly sells itself. It did in our case. And then the third call to action is, as you counsel your members and you see people looking at funding their retirement, I'm taking my retirement dollars and putting it in this vehicle because I don't trust the public markets, and I do trust my C12 colleagues to be good stewards over these assets. And I need income to live on. So we're creating an income vehicle for C12 members who want to invest in other C12 members. And as you talk to folks and you find people in that position, you know, just have them contact us, because those are the people that have the wherewithal and the experience. If we ever have a company that has trouble, we will have a vested consultants and board members in our investor class that can step in and help in those situations. So that is basically nearly the 30 minutes that we've allocated to this. We are happy to address any questions that come up that this has stimulated, and we're certainly thrilled to talk with you all and share our strategy and our business with you, and look forward to working with you as we network through the C12 community for both companies that need this kind of capital, as well as members who are looking, like I am, for a good vehicle to fund their retirement.
Thanks, Tom. This is Jared again.
If there are no more questions.
I think with that, there are a couple questions that we can quickly address. One was, does Perpetuate only use the ESOP vehicle? And does this ESOP provide the same type of tax savings as traditional ESOPs? And the answer to that is no, we don't only use the ESOP vehicle. We do find the ESOP to be an elegant solution, particularly when people kind of take the time to analyze the after-tax benefits of it. But Perpetuate will provide capital for many types of situations that don't involve an ESOP at all. Growth capital, or a company that's looking to do an acquisition and needs capital, etc., which have nothing to do with an ESOP, we will provide capital in that scenario. And the next question was, does this ESOP provide the same types of tax savings as traditional ESOPs? And the answer is yes, it's the exact same form of a traditional ESOP.
For those of you who have companies that are interested in learning more about ESOPs, Brant and Jared have actually written the book on ESOPs. I compare ESOPs to life insurance. It needs to be sold. It's not bought. It's pretty daunting when you first look at it. But over time, after you learn about it, my company was I had partners who were very skeptical that it was going to be a viable alternative for us, and it just turned out to be an amazing solution, tax-wise, gift-wise, as well as energizing the staff to achieve far more than they'd ever achieved before.
This is Brant. I would really strongly encourage everybody on the call to don't pigeonhole the Perpetuate Fund as an ESOP solution. That's not 100% what it is. Think of it as those three criteria points, which is the filter through which everybody should analyze whatever transaction, discussion, or alternative that is being discussed around your roundtable. Think of it as the best way to perpetuate C12 alignment, the long-term success and independence of the business, and again, most importantly, really the only way to achieve liquidity that's just as competitive as selling out to a third party, but controlling the company after you sold it and perpetuating the ministry spending and impact and culture of the business. That is what Perpetuate Capital does in multiple forms. Only one of them is the ESOP.
So another question was, will these slides be available? Yes, they will. Troy will maybe send you a copy and you can pass it out if that works. Also a question about, are we actively marketing to C12 members and companies to invest in Perpetuate as well as utilize it for their businesses? And there is an opportunity to invest and obviously as well as utilize Perpetuate as a financing tool for the companies within C12.
And currently, this is Tom, I have spoken to probably 12 C12 members. 8 of them have committed up to $5 million in capital to seed the fund. So we do have members that feel the same as I do, that we really want to fund our retirement with a ministry investment versus just a financial investment in some publicly traded company who we don't know or trust.
There's a few other questions that relate
when you
to the
give
nuances of ESOPs. I think what I would recommend is we send out the link to the ESOP 101 webinar, and then we also actually can provide potentially copies of our book. There's a lot of nuances to an ESOP, and it's hard to answer on in this form on this call. So maybe those may be better educational tools than using our time now to get into that level of detail.
The other thing I would say is if you have questions, just call us. The information, our contact information will be in both of the links, and so we're all like half of our week is spent fielding calls and kind of educating. It's a very normal thing for us to do, and just please feel free to do that.
There's a question here about there's several other questions here queued up. I don't know if you can see those, Jared, but I'll take one. Dan Walters had asked a question about the relationship with Perpetuate and 310 Coalition, and essentially Perpetuate Capital is a member of the 310 Coalition, so that they're part of that ecosystem that's been put together that operates within the 310 Coalition to serve C12 members in navigating transitions. And Dave,
it looks like I'm seeing the question.
Dave Lacine, you asked about presenting at Spring Chair. We can certainly look for opportunities to put this in front of Chair Core. I think member awareness and chair awareness is key, and we know it's got to start with having you all equipped to be able to guide members. And so I know one follow-up action is we can put these resources in a connect post, a series post, the webinar, and these other things that were mentioned, so that at least we can access them. And we'll just have to explore other ways we continue to bring awareness and equip all of us to know about things like Perpetuate Capital as we guide members.
This is Brant. I'm seeing a question from Alex that says, are ESOP companies tax exempt? And the answer to that is yes. So over and above the fact that the sellers who sell their stock to the ESOP can not pay taxes on those sale proceeds, if the ESOP transaction is structured correctly, the corporation stops paying taxes forever. And when you no longer have to pay those IRS payments, that cash builds up, and it allows for the corporation to not just continue its ministry spending, but actually increase its ministry spending. So it's very, very elegant in that regard.
Troy, are there any further questions?
Let me read this question, Randy, real time. Does C12 create a conflict of interest to Perpetuate requires continued membership versus recommends continued participation to make sure we're above reproach? Yeah, part of it is similar to the covenant that we ask both members and 310 Coalition partners to enter into as they work with 310 Coalition folks. And obviously we're not going to require C12 membership. We're going to highly encourage it, but we certainly will encourage a faith-based peer group type experience for the CEO of a company that continues on in this way. So it's not going to be a legalistic type requirement, but certainly one where we want to ensure the ministry does perpetuate. That's the purpose of both Perpetuate and the overall 310 Coalition. So Steve Calhoun had asked a question about having interest from members on both sides. Both Tom, as you had said, as an investment vehicle, we have members from time to time say, I want to invest in C12 member companies. And this is obviously an opportunity for that, as well as the need to navigate through a transition where Perpetuate may be able to help accomplish. That is, we have the best way to reach you guys is we can share this deck. But I don't know if there's another slide that shows, like, is there a point person or an email, or what's your preferred method to point interested folks to begin the conversation?
Yeah, Troy, we'll send you a
Grant
copy of this
B.
presentation with, I think we just have our emails in here, potentially phone numbers as well, and then reach out via any method.
Perfect.
And I think, Brant, I will take the lead. This is Tom. I will take the lead on investors. Brant and Jared will take the lead on companies that are interested in the structured equity investments and education. And frankly, we have of the 7 or 8 investors that have committed so far, 3 of them have companies that we're very interested in bringing on as investments. So there will be people who will be investors, they'll be borrowers or structured equity investments first, and they'll take some of that liquidity and invest with us as investors. Yes, and the other interesting thing that's happening is we're talking to some Christian-owned businesses that are not C12 members currently, which we're encouraging them to consider that, not as a requirement, but as a suggestion for an investment. And there's a home builder in Dallas that's meeting with the Dallas. He's going to attend his first meeting this month. I have a wonderful relationship with a company in Nashville that has 30 different subsidiary companies, and Dewey and I are going to dinner with the chairman of that company and the director of development in February. So we look at ourselves not just as serving C12 members, but if C12 grows, it will, and yeah, we can help that. We can help you grow your local groups. Then that helps everybody. And the kingdom is served better, in my view.
That's great. Well, I see no other questions that have been teed up. So with that, we will share these things with you via Connect. And so as I get both the recording of the webinar, the slide deck, and any other resources, we'll put those in a series post on Connect under Perpetuate Capital, and that'll provide some places you can point members to. And Tom, Jared, Brant, thank you guys for what you're doing and for taking the time here to share this. And we look forward to what God does in and through this.
Yes,
Thank you so
all.
much. We appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
Amen.
Great. All right. Well, take care, guys. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you as well. So long.
All right, you too.